Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, October the 15th. It is the 287th day of the year. There are only 79 days left in the year 2024, and welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Tom. March the 18th in the year 1975 is a day I will always remember and cherish. Why? It is the day I graduated from Auburn University. It is a memorable day for me for a lot of reasons. My parents were there, as that day became a part of Gossam family legend. President Philpott, who I had gotten to know, gave me a big smile as I marched towards him to get my degree. But there's something else that stands out in my mind. Of the several thousand students that graduated that day, there was one other African American besides myself. He also graduated that day. Having gone through most of my classes as the only Black student, it was ironic that there would be another Black graduate that day. It was also ironic that amongst all the graduates there that day, I never saw him, never knew he was there. When we crossed paths as adults later in our respective professions, we learned from each other that we had graduated on the same day. That other graduate is here today, and as a matter of fact, he's today's G-List guest. Our guest is Dr. John Jernigan. Dr. John Jernigan is an internist in Montgomery, Alabama, and he has over 44 years of experience in the medical field. He graduated from the University of Florida in 1979 with his doctorate in Auburn University as his first African-American pre-med student. Dr. Jernigan quickly became a role model on campus, serving as a resident advisor for his dorm before earning his degree in chemistry. A graduate of the University of Florida College of Medicine, Dr. Jernigan opened Mulberry Medical Associates in Montgomery in 1984, at a time where African-American doctors numbered 1 out of every 8,000 people in the state of Alabama. We look forward to hearing from Dr. Jernigan. Our show today, of course, is sponsored by the Best Girl Consulting Firm. So let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Best Girl customizes the solution that fits your needs. So let's go to our roundtable regulars, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Good morning, Barbara Wallace Edwards. How are you?
Good morning, Tom. I'm doing well. How are you? How are you, Michael?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you.
Morning, Michael Walker. How are you, buddy?
I am doing well, TG. Glad to be with you this morning.
Yeah, well, good. So what's going on in your world, Michael? We'll let you go first today. Barbara's always
Well, I appreciate it. Well, thank you. I get a chance to start today.
Yes.
I've been riding the bench all day, all year long. I like starting. Well, there's a couple things I'd like to share, especially this thing. Recently with the storms that we had, back-to-back storms and what have you, in particularly in some areas of North Carolina, people did not get the emergency alerts on their telephone or cell phone to let them know that there was a chance of flooding with this storm. And as a result, they met some misfortune. And there's a big news story out about setting your phone up so that you can get the alerts from the government and what have you. And it could save your life. As a matter of fact, some people perish as a result of not even knowing that their area was an area that would be flooded. Some people went as far as trying to call their county officials to find out and were unable to reach them. And then when the county officials realized that their area was in jeopardy of being flooded, they sent messages out, but you know what? The cell phone towers were down.
Right.
Oh.
and all kind of other things. So I just wanted to tell everybody out there listening and viewing us that if you go into Google and you can Google emergency alerts, and they'll give you step by step of how to go in and make sure your phone is set up so that you can get those alerts for emergency situations.
Yeah, that's good.
We all need to do that and make sure
Yes,
that,
that's
that
very
we can do
important.
that. Yes. On the other hand, today is October the 15th in Atlanta, and it's the first day of early voting. And the news is already reporting they can tell it's voting day, as if there are more people trying to vote early. We had heard earlier that maybe as many as 65% would try to do early voting.
Wow.
And
Wow.
with that, it's interesting that there's been a lot of back and forth regarding the courtship of the African American male between the two camps, between Trump and Harris. Um, Barack Obama got a little heat last week for his conversation with black males. It sounded like he was lecturing them, and there was some pushback on that, what have you. But Kamala Harris has come out and she has talked about her program for black men and the things that she wants to do. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, she said 1 million fully forgivable loans up to $20,000 for black business owners and others looking to start their businesses. This is directed at black males. You know, I think that is admirable, but I think $20,000 is not enough in this day and time. You know, when you think about the cost of starting a black business, if you look at as an African American male, I don't think $20,000 will get it. I think $50,000 is a better number, but that's just me. The other thing I thought was pretty good is looking at the health outcomes and addressing those issues among the black male population. And this one, legalizing recreational marijuana and creating opportunities for black entrepreneurs in this budding industry. Now, that one I certainly agree with, because there are so many African American men that are in jail and serving time for having a small, minimal amount of marijuana on them, and they get thrown in the slammer, and their records are ruined. Now they've come out and they've made it legal to have marijuana. But if you got caught with marijuana and was convicted, now that it's a legalized business, you can't get a license to go in to do the business. So,
and it's a business that's dominated by big business.
Yes, it is.
You're absolutely correct in that. Small guys aren't getting a shot at the marijuana business.
Not at all. Not at all. And I've even read where some people applied to get a license to be a distributor, but if one of their relatives had been convicted of breaking the law, it came back on them. And again,
Wow.
you know, Tom, you're familiar with barriers to entry. Okay. I see these as barriers to entry, and they're disproportionate, targeted a certain demographic.
Absolutely.
Hats off to Vice President Harris for identifying that and looking to make things different from that standpoint. She also talked about supporting regulations to protect black men and others who invest in and own cryptocurrencies and what have you. So, you know, I find it interesting that a lot of the electorate say they trust former President Trump on the economy. But when you look at his record and what have you, I don't really get it.
Right.
I don't see. He just has a reputation of being a wheeler dealer, but that's because he had a lot of opportunities afforded to him that were not afforded to other people.
And most of those opportunities fell flat on their face, Michael. I mean, a lot of the businesses he started went bankrupt. So I still don't understand why people trust his economic plan, or he doesn't really have a plan, but his economic background. He hasn't done well at anything.
No.
Let me go back to the Barack Obama thing. I listened to what the little part that they ran on the news, and I didn't find anything about it offensive.
Me either.
Of course, I vote, and I've voted ever since I was old enough to vote.
Right.
And I've already voted in this election because I vote mail-in.
Right.
And so I voted already. So I didn't see it didn't offend me at all. And I kind of trying to understand why other guys got offended. If the message fits, then hey, do
right. You know? And that's what I was going to ask the two of you. What was offensive about it to you all as black males? Because I listened to the whole thing. I didn't find anything that was offensive.
Well, I didn't necessarily find it offensive. I think maybe perhaps if it was one thing that I could point to that was somewhat sensitive, or maybe I feel like misdirected, was when he talked about and lumping black men into the category of having an issue with voting for a female to be president.
I think that's a big issue with a lot of black men.
I was going to say it is an issue for some men.
Well, obviously, it's not an issue with you. It's not an issue with me, but it is an issue with. I've seen ministers get up in church and talk about not voting for a woman.
Right.
And so that is an issue. And, you know, I don't know. I just, if you're going to vote, vote. Right. You know, if you ain't going to vote, shut up. You know?
Right. I agree.
If you're going to vote for the right person.
Right.
Shut up.
I'd rather vote for a woman any day than to vote for a criminal. I mean, again, those two things are.
I hear you.
Well, I try to look at it from maybe a little bit more of a rational, logical perspective. And when I look at that, that I really don't think that African American men, based on historical perspective, should be caught up in that. I'm not going to support a black female or a woman in a leadership position. I think that's territory that's been primarily dominated on by our white male counterparts from the sexist standpoint. And reason why I say that, if you're a black male, you've been subjected to bias and racial barriers and all kinds of stuff your entire life. So now why all of a sudden you think that you are right over here with them that can sit back and say we don't think or believe that a woman can lead?
But Michael, again, that's you, but there's still quite a few African American males who feel that way. They don't want a woman to lead them. Like Tom was saying, I've even heard some go back to the Bible to say in the Bible it says a woman shouldn't be the head. So they're trying to make it a biblical thing. And I'm thinking that, but again, you're looking at that perspective. The Bible also says, what about a sinner? I mean, what about someone who knows they're lying and continues to lie, or steals and continues to steal? Why would you want that person leading you? So, again, but I've heard the same things that Tom has heard. Some men are just feeling that way, period.
Well, I would kind of like what you said, Barbara. We know who Trump is, right?
Right.
And when somebody tell you who they are, you need to believe them.
Believe them. Absolutely.
That's right.
You don't give them another turn.
Right. If you can give him 10 times and the outcome is still going to be the same. It doesn't.
Hey, you know what? That reminds me of this guy on the road, and he came across a black snake in the wintertime. The black snake was frozen and near death, and asked the guy to help him. So he picked him up, took him back to his house, put him by the fireplace. When the snake got warm, he bit the man. Yeah. And the man said, "Well, you bit me." He said, "Well, you knew I was a snake when you picked me up."
Yes.
So, and I don't know. I just think I think maybe as far as President Obama, maybe his time has passed. I don't know if I'm phrasing that the right way, but maybe some of the younger guys don't feel what we felt when he won the presidency, because it was such a historical thing, and I can see that. Right. Times change and people move on. And I guess because he was Obama, maybe I was willing to forgive him and not hear the message, but I just did. And then we were sitting there, my wife and I were watching it, and she was saying, well, if you listen to the whole thing, they just played the part on the news. If you listen to the whole thing, it was the message came across differently.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. I just think that for me, and I'll just say it this way, there isn't much of a choice. I mean, you know, why would you want to vote for Trump? I mean, I don't, I mean, come on. And I had a friend of mine that lives around the corner. And we were talking one day, and he fishes a lot. And he was saying something about catching the mullet fish. And I said, no, man, I don't want any mullet. I like snapper and grouper, He said, Tom, all black people eat mullet. And I said to myself, okay, see, they're not being racist. So let me just, I said, I've never had any mullet in my life. I was raised Catholic. And during that time, we couldn't eat meat on Friday. And so my dad would always stop by the fish market and he'd get some red snapper. And that's what we would have today.
Right.
So no, I don't know anything about eating mullet. And I just thought, God, now this guy here doesn't have a clue.
Right.
I tell him he's racist, that's a racist statement. He's gonna have his feelings all hurt and so on and so forth. But why would you say something that's stupid? I think the ignorance level is off the charts these days.
Yes, it is.
People just are, saying things, and now he's got a sign around his house. Something politically that's something I wouldn't agree with.
Right.
I've already tried to explain to him that he was an idiot, but that doesn't seem to work. So I just move on.
Without a doubt, he's an idiot.
I try not to look over there. I pass by.
Right. Look the other way. Just look the other way.
Tom, I got to comment on what you said. I find it very interesting how some white people know more about being black than you do, and you've been black all your life.
All your life, yes.
I find that's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what mullet tastes like if you prepared it for a meal and handed it to me, Not that I'm against it, I just never had it.
Right.
If I'm included in the all black category, then something's wrong now.
Your friend needs to learn that he should never make those kind of statements, Tom, because they're not true.
Ignorance is not bliss.
That's absolutely correct.
Let me say something. Becky Davis Gibson down in Tampa said she got power back on yesterday.
Thank God.
Great. Good for you, Becky.
Good, Becky.
And I know they got it on in Savannah last week.
Okay.
But, that was an incredible storm.
Yes, it was.
I saw where Cedric
McIntyre
lives in Tampa.
Yes.
I saw his son posted something yesterday where they had a lot of trees down.
I did check with Cedric and Geraldine to see if they were okay before the storm, actually, see if they got into safety, and they replied back that they were all fine. Everything was okay. So,
yeah, I talked to them before.
Okay.
But anyway, Barbara, you're up.
Well, Tom, I want to go back to something Michael talked about, the FEMA and the people who are receiving help from FEMA as a result of the hurricanes. I listened to a talk show over the weekend, and there was a gentleman on there who said that his father-in-law was a Republican who lived in North Carolina. And he said that his wife had been sick about her parents who have been major affected by the hurricane, but they are now refusing FEMA assistance because Trump and Vance have told them that if they receive any help from FEMA, that they're going to lose their house, they're going to lose their property, and therefore they've just refused any kind of FEMA help. And he said, the house is basically destroyed. They can't live in it. They're having to live in a hotel right now. And the gentleman that was on the talk show said that he and his wife live 3 states away, and they're not there to really help them. So they're trying to, tell them you need to let FEMA help you. FEMA has reached out to them to try to, assist them, and they're basically refusing. Wow. And he said that his wife is just sick about it because they can't get through to them that this has nothing to do with you losing your house. FEMA's trying to help you. And it's sad that people are just turning assistance away because of their political thoughts and their political, people convincing them that they shouldn't accept FEMA's help. And this guy was saying, he said, we basically have 3 parties now. He said, there's the Democrats, the Republicans, and then there's the MAGAs. And, he said, the MAGAs are just off the charts. It's like they don't believe in reality anymore. They've lost their minds, and they just cannot accept reality.
Well, I tell you what, the former president accepted a lot from the government when he was the former president.
Right.
He stole a lot. I call
a lot of money,
because the president shouldn't be getting paid to be the president other than his salary.
Right.
But you don't put the Secret Service in your hotels,
right,
everywhere you go, so that money then comes back to your company.
Absolutely.
You don't do that. Well, if you're a crook, you do it.
So. Right. Yeah. We're talking about the man who, when we were in the COVID crisis, was sending help over to his friend over in Russia, and people in America was dying. And again, why could people support someone that does that type of thing? Your citizens are dying as a result of needing the assistance, needing the help, and you secretly send help over to Putin over in Russia. Where's the logic in that?
It's funny. That could be considered treason because
absolutely, and it
Putin
should.
is an enemy of the state,
right?
And you have a national catastrophic disaster on your hands in the U.S., and people in the U.S. are dying, and we really don't know exactly what it is. Then we get the COVID test, so you know whether you have COVID or not, so you can be treated. And he's sending it over to Putin, and Putin says, "Don't tell anybody you're doing this."
Right? They'll be mad at. They'll be mad at you. They won't be mad at me. They can be mad at you. And he listened to Putin again. How can we trust someone? How can we trust someone to be president that takes that type of action, makes those type of decisions?
Well, I think one of the things that's been said is that he likes to be flattered.
Right.
He likes for people to tell him how wonderful.
And these dictators of these other countries know that. They know that they can control him by flattering him, giving him compliments, and telling him what a great person he is, and then they can get anything they want from him. Well, he'd hand the country over to another country.
This is the one thing I have to say. He was on camera yesterday saying, "I love black men."
Black men.
Yeah, just the way he said it.
Yes.
Caused the hair to raise on my neck.
Yeah.
But I sat there and I said, and this is the same guy who took out a full-page ad on the Central Park 5, who were innocent and said they needed to be prosecuted, and everybody wants to turn and look the other way on that.
Right.
Okay. I'm just checking. All right.
I'm with you.
We're with you. We're all with you, Michael.
Yeah. You guys got anything else? Before we go to Sean, she's got a minute for us. Anything else? Okay, well, Sean, you got a minute for us. Come on, tell us what's happening today.
Good morning to everyone joining in with us. My name is Shantia Jones, and this has Got a Minute. An enormous crowd consisting mostly of African-American men demonstrates on the National Mall in October of 1995, an event known as the Million Man March. Driven by their desire to see Congress act in the interests of African Americans, and to combat negative stereotypes of Black men. A disputed but undeniably high number of attendees unite for over 12 hours of speeches by leaders from many different corners of the civil rights movement. The Million Man March was the brainchild of Louis Farrakhan, leader of the Nation of Islam, and was organized by the National African American Leadership Summit and many other groups. The march was largely a response to the politics of the time, with a Republican-controlled Congress and a conservatively Democratic President, Bill Clinton. Washington was gripped by a desire to lower taxes and to cut government spending on education, housing, and social programs. Attendees took in speeches and performances by representatives from the African and the Caribbean, a number of Christian ministries, and other figures such as Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King III, Maya Angelou, and Dr. Cornel West, and many others. Organizers point out the fact that over 1.5 million Black men registered to vote for the first time over the course of the next year as evidence of their success. Make sure you also go out and vote. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute.
Sean, I'm glad you brought that up because I went to the Million Man March, and there were several of us that went from guys I knew, Stacey Danley, Cedric McIntyre, guy from Tampa who played quarterback for the Bucks. We all went, and it was it was the most meaningful thing I think I had been to. And the interesting thing was we would go back to the hotel in the evening and watch the news so we could see how different the news was from what was actually happening on the ground, because there were no incidents. It was a day of peace and love. And it was one of the most loving things I had been involved in, with and I mean, you'd walking down the street and there's just Black men everywhere and they're just greeting each other and hugging and so on and so forth. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I'm glad I was able to go. So hopefully if we can get that spirit back, then we don't need somebody like Trump trying to tell people he loves Black men. You know,
he loves to see you in jail. That's what he loves to see.
Hopefully, I'll see him in jail. So, anyway, anything else?
No, sir.
Let me move on. So, Hollywood's got the A list, and here on Tuesdays with Tom, we have the G list. Now, G list guest today grew up on a farm in nearby Union Springs, Alabama. He dreamed of a career using his mind rather than just his hands. He was his high school's valedictorian. He entered Auburn University as its first African-American pre-med student. Dr. Jernigan quickly became a role model on campus. There were so few of us there, we all knew each other and tried to look out for each other. And as I mentioned earlier, John and I graduated on the same day. We've been friends for many, many years. And so let's welcome Dr. John Jernigan to our G list today. Dr. Jernigan, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fine. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you fine. We hear you fine. We got.
I've enjoyed the show so far.
Okay. Well, Barbara's got a question for you, so I'm going to let her just jump right in.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Jernigan. Thank you for being with us this morning. I would like to ask you about the major health concerns. What are the major health concerns in the world today, and how do we combat those?
The concerns, as always, the number one cause of death is cardiovascular. We of course, look at all the risk factors for cardiac disease. Of course, in central Alabama, the Black Belt is also the stroke belt. I was in London for the hypertension meeting in 1997, and the very first lecture on the demographics of hypertension, stroke, and cardiovascular disease, they showed a belt around the southern Alabama, and the belt was the Black Belt, and the buckle of that belt was Montgomery, Alabama, exactly where I practice now. So
Wow.
we have hypertension, we have stroke, we have heart attack, heart failure. Those are the number one causes of death for young Black men. Is auto accident, HIV, and it's gunshot wounds, unfortunately. Um, so we uh, that's in the younger population, but in the population in general, it's cardiovascular diseases number one. Of course, cancer is number two, and there are a lot of other things that go on together. Of course, cardiovascular include anything that the heart serves, and the brain is stroke when it's blocked off,
Right.
and the heart is a heart attack and heart failure. So it's all cardiovascular disease is the number one killer in our community.
Wow. And when it comes to cardiovascular disease, I have always been concerned about that because it's one of the things that's been rampant in my family. But what are some things people can do to overcome that? I mean, I know nutrition and exercise are key, but are those factors things that people can do to really help eliminate or avoid having issues with cardiovascular disease?
Yes, it starts with a lifestyle. If we can decrease our fat intake, if we can decrease our salt intake, that in itself will probably do a 10% improvement.
Right.
That's with the intake of the fat and the salt. Of course, exercise, weight loss, um, and mental fitness, and anything else that help healthy for us. But it will start with lifestyle changes first. And there are some people that lifestyle changes just won't help. And they are help some, but
Right.
it got a blood pressure of 200 over 120, and lifestyle changes will drop that 200 down to 180.
Right.
But the goal is to get you under 120. So you got to have medication to drop that other 60 points. And we got so many people that don't want the medication. So
Right.
another point is if you prescribe medication, take them. If you have side effects on the medication, inform your healthcare provider, and make sure he finds something that you can tolerate and does not have side effects, that's not affecting you, and get on them and stay on them.
Right.
Lifestyle help, but it
Yes.
not so much. So you gotta, I have patients that come in and tell me, said, I will not take more than one pill a day. I said, excuse me? He said, "Oh, I don't, but my grandmama lived to be 95 and she never took any medicine." I said, your grandmother didn't have a cell phone ringing every 5 minutes either, and didn't
Right.
300 pounds, and she walked about 10 miles a day going to town and back.
Right.
Didn't have the calorie intake we have. But anyway, those are just some of the things we can do to try to help. Another interesting, I don't know how much time I have with each segment, but another interesting thing I got involved in was magnesium.
Yes.
I got a call one day from a company in Kentucky that asked me to be on their advisory board for magnesium. And I was curious, how did you get my name? Who are you? What is it? And he said, you're the number one magnesium prescriber in the country.
Wow.
Are you kidding? Of course, we don't keep up with statistics.
Right.
I had no clue. When I write a prescription, I have no idea how many other doctors in the country are writing, but there are companies that keep up and count every prescription and sell that data to pharmaceutical marketing companies, etc. And to summarize, to make a very long story short, at one of these magnesium conferences, it turns out that the black belt is also a pod where there's low magnesium in the soil. So our foods might be low in magnesium. And also, there are other places where the death rate is not as high with stroke as in central Alabama. There's one place in Wisconsin where they have a lot of dairy, they have a lot of fat in their diet, they have a lot of hypertension, just like in the South. But the people live longer, they have fewer strokes, they have fewer heart attacks, and it turns out their water is high in selenium and high in magnesium. So I am a doctor in these areas that make sure that all of my patients have all their trace elements, their magnesium, their phosphorus, their minerals. I make sure I test them. One of a few that do that, and of course I got some. My oldest patient lived to be 110.
Wow.
So I'm
That's great.
I'm also sharing this information with my patients, and I try to make sure that I take care of all these other minor things that make us sick, make us feel bad, that might be interfering with insulin resistance.
Yes.
And there's some stuff I teach my students, endothelial dysfunction. All of that can be affected by your cholesterol level, your blood pressure level, your stress level, your level of inflammatory mediators in your body, and little things like magnesium and phosphorus and potassium and all these things.
Yes.
There are a lot of other technical stuff that I do that has contributed to the success of my practice.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Jernigan.
Michael?
Good morning, Dr. Jernigan. Thanks for being with us this morning. And go ahead. And I'm happy to hear you say magnesium and potassium, because I prescribe to that myself, and I take that to try to keep my blood pressure regulated and stuff. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is that there seems to be somewhat of a shortage of African American doctors in the country now. And I think that maybe somewhat contributes to this disparity in treatment of African Americans. What do you feel needs to be done to encourage and have more people of color becoming doctors now? What do you think is a barrier for that?
Number one, money. Number two is the assault on the fact that it requires a certain amount of you need to have some connections and things like that. And thirdly, we need to get our people prepared, improve our educational system. So it's a very complex problem. We got an attack on DEI right now. People do not realize the importance of the diversified population. Uh, they don't realize how important it is to have people of color actually treating the community. So there are a lot of barriers to getting African Americans in the healthcare field. And now it's a lot of people do not realize it's now more of an economic barrier in some cases. Just my son, who has just finished medical school, he's probably going to have about $5,000 bill when he's finished. So it's some medical schools are $150,000 a year in tuition. When I was applying, it was like $5,000 a year for places. Now it's like $150,000 a year, $100,000 a year, $60,000, $75,000. It's all over the. How many people you know that can just spend $100,000 a year? And that's a house for most folks. So, I mean, some of it's economics, a lot of it the educational system, and of course, down to this, we got to get our people with the vision that they can actually do it, and we got to get our people trained in pre-med and in the high schools, and get some of them motivated that it's something, it's a goal you can achieve. Um, and so it's just like with so many other problems and so many other professions, it's outreach in our communities to let them know that it's a job and there is a shortage. And I wish that we had more involvement. When I was at the University of Florida College of Medicine, we had 80 students. Uh, the African American students, we had 14 that started. 12 of us finished. Um, that was, you can do the statistics, 14 out of 80. Actually, the PIMS program at Florida State had a 2-year program that fed into the University of Florida, and it was about uh, 40 that came down from Florida State that joined us our second year. Therefore, it was a total of 120 people. Even back then, it was 14 African American students that was in my class. Um, my nephew finished about 6 years ago at UAB, um, and went up there to the graduation party. It was 3 out of 175, one black male.
Wow.
And the rest of them were females. I think it was like a total of maybe 5 or 6 that finished out of 175. And 40 years ago, it was in my class was like 14 out of 80.
Wow.
So there's a focus on decreasing in minority participation. There's a focus on saying DEI is something bad. They even got, and the conversation you guys were talking about earlier, the former president is saying that his opponent is a DEI high. So, I mean, there's a negative connotation that they put on things, and there's a financial barrier, an educational barrier, and then we got cultural barriers, as well as the kids are not encouraged that they can do things other than dribble basketballs or do hip hop. And we got to overcome so many barriers from our communities to our educational institution. It's a very, very difficult problem. My group, the Capital City Medical Society, has a scholarship that we give to UAB for a black student um, uh, every year. And we were told that we can't say it's for a black student anymore. That violates some kind of laws or some kind of something with the DEI or whatever. They all dismantling that kind of thing. Here we are, black physician with a black organization trying to help a student, and we can't say it's for a black student now. So, in fact, I was asking Tom how they got their language set in their scholarships, how we can make it so that it can be helping us without uh, giving it to somebody who might get up and shoot us. So,
Right.
um, I mean, it's a multifaceted problem. We have to start with the babies and keep them encouraged and work it up and let them know that these things are possible. A lot of us go to high schools and speak to a group. We speak to Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts. Anything we can do to get the word out that it's a great profession, it's a rewarding profession, and it's not as compensated as well as, but you're compensated well. That's a multifaceted problem with cultural and economic contributing factors.
So John, let me ask you this. You're also the coroner for the city of Montgomery. Tell us what the only thing we know about coroners is what we see on TV shows. And like Quincy or what have you. Can you tell us what a coroner does on a daily basis and what's that like for you?
It's interesting. I'm part of a combination. I want to speak out of my deceased brother, Sidney Jernigan. Sidney was a coroner in Bullock County. He's a retired police officer. And when he was running for the position, I asked him, I said, as a police officer, why are you running for that coroner? All of those are undertakers. And he said, well, really, the coroner is the law enforcement officer. And I didn't realize that. I said, it is. I thought you just go and pronounce people dead. He said, no, the coroner, and if you look it up, the coroner comes from the word to coronate. He's the head law enforcement officer for that particular county. And and 64 out of the 67 counties in Alabama, they are elected positions. And the largest three, Jefferson, Mobile, and Montgomery, they are appointed. And the largest three, they have to be doctors. The rest of the counties in Alabama, they are political positions. You do not have to be qualified. You don't have to be a doctor. But in Montgomery, you need to be a doctor. And David Thrasher, another Auburn graduate, he's on that research board. Tom, I don't know if you met David over there or not.
Yes.
And I finished close to the same time at Auburn, and he had been on. He had been Montgomery's coroner since for 15 years, and he was tired of it, and he said, we need to hand it over to another Auburn man. They've never had a black one. So how would you like to be the first black coroner in Montgomery? I said, no, David, I'm busy. Don't have time for any such thing. Get some of these other guys that are not busy. He said, you got temperament for it. I would prefer for you to have. And he said, I got a good staff. Most of it is executive kind of work. You don't have to do all the things. I said, man, all the murders and shootings they have, I'm not going to be out there doing that. He said, well, I got a staff that works with the paramedics that they be on the scene most of the time anyway. I said, oh, so to make a long story short, I was appointed by Stephen Reed and confirmed by the county commission. That was 2014. And so I've been the coroner of Montgomery for 10 years. It's been an interesting job. We have several responsibilities. One, we just want to make sure that we are the ones that determine whether there's foul play or not. That's the first thing. We want to make sure that people are not being murdered. And there's no foul play when somebody is found dead at home, they get killed on the interstate, or the gunshot wound, those kind of things. So one of our jobs is to determine if a person died naturally or whether they have some foul play. Another job that we have to deal with is mass fatalities and things like that. We have to have a disaster plan for those kind of things. Another is to prove all cremations. Make sure that somebody doesn't die at home and they cremate them before any evidence can be obtained as to the cause of their death. So I have to approve every cremation. So in the process of approving cremation, we have to make sure that the patient died naturally from some natural cause as opposed to cremating someone and getting rid of the evidence. So those are some of my responsibilities as the coroner of Montgomery County. It's one of those things. It's one of those things. There's been an interesting interesting diversion from my other 30 years of practice. And this is as being the head law enforcement officer in the county. I might have a sheriff deputy come up to my office and say, we need you to look at these papers because somebody's suing the sheriff, and you got to do it before we can serve them. So I'm the only law enforcement officer in the Montgomery that can arrest the sheriff of the county. So I'm law enforcement. And I'm also medical. So we sort of cross medical and law enforcement together. And that's what the coroner does.
Michael, I know you've got to run in a little bit. You got questions for Dr. John?
Yes, I'd like to ask this question. Since there's a blurred line or a crossover between medical and law enforcement, do you carry a gun? Are you allowed to carry a gun as a coroner? Or does a coroner carry a gun?
I don't carry one, but of course I do have a badge. I do have the ability to carry a gun. I have a pistol permit, but I was donated a pistol by one of my patients who saw me leaving the office at 11 o'clock one night and got concerned for my safety, and she gave me her husband's pistol. And this is my badge. So I am that kind. If they keep having murders and drive-by shootings, I might start carrying one. But as most of you all know, that most people that carry guns, they end up killing somebody in their family or somebody else. There are very few people that actually have a gun that actually for protection. I got a few of my patients who say that they were leaving the office business. Some strange people walk up to them and they put their hand on the gun and they run. But in general, no, I don't carry a gun.
Okay.
Barbara?
Yeah, Dr. Jernigan, of course, you attended Auburn and attended as a pre-med student. Back during that time, I started Auburn in 1975, was a engineering major. And I was discouraged by one of my professors that I shouldn't be in engineering as a Black student. That just wasn't for me. First of all, he said I shouldn't be at Auburn. I wonder, what was your experience like at Auburn as a pre-med student? And were you ever discouraged that you shouldn't be in that field at all?
Oh yes, I think this go from 8 to 9. It'll take about 2 hours to go over all of it. But
Okay.
yeah, there were people that did not encourage me. There was one English class I got in. I sat on the front as always, so I wouldn't be distracted. I always tried to I was number one in my class in high school. I always focused on love learning. My mother wanted me to be the brightest person on the sun. I shout out to my mom who sat me on her knee back when I was 3 years old and would read to me at night and tell me that the key to getting off the farm, son, is a good education. So I was sitting on the front seat, and this professor, the very first day, he said, I'm not an easy professor for you guys. I want you to know it was English comp. He said, I only give out about 1 or 2 A's per quarter. And he said, so most of you in here will get B's or C's. Then he came up to my desk and got about 3 inches from my face. And he said, some of you all are going to fail.
Oh,
Wow.
Unfortunately, he was one that was pretty honest, and he let me know that I was going to fail the very first day. So
right.
I was down to the Dean Hart's office that right after class of arts and sciences. I said, Well, the guy told me I'm going to fail. I think I'll be better in a different class, please.
Yeah, that's the right move.
Wow.
I think that got me were the ones that were nice, and they would hide, and they would
Yes.
have those feelings, and they would give me the hint at the beginning. They'd try to knock you out with it at the end of the quarter. But in
Yes.
general, yeah, I got lots of moments when I was discouraged, and a lot of moments when, you know, I was the only black in the class, and I had to prove myself every single quarter. And the beautiful thing about pre-med was I had a lot of science and
Right.
chemistry and biology and stuff like that. So if the answer was 395 joules or 650 grams or 500 foot-pounds or whatever, and I came out with the answer, they couldn't discriminate against me.
Right.
So I could focus on that, but they could get me an English comp and the subjective answers.
Yes.
One of my teachers in English comp said it's just choppy. I said, well, I took the same kind of sentence structure that we were studying in class. I got whereas, wherefore, however. I said I got a lot of connecting words in this paragraph, and each paragraph connected to the next one. I said, what do you mean it's choppy? It's just choppy. It's a C paper. Now, Dr. Boyson, the previous professor, told me it was a B paper. She said it was a C paper. Now, how can it? I got a professor, PhD, tell me it's a B paper, and then
Right.
the assistant tell me it's a C paper. So
Yeah.
it was that kind of areas where I had the most problem, but I don't have time to tell about the nigger written on my door and
Oh,
the
wow.
keys. I have to come back for that story I told you about.
Yeah.
But there was some barriers there, but I tried to stay positive when I left. And one thing is, I can say.
I don't know what's going on there.
I think his phone is ringing or something, and it's affecting the sound.
Okay. All right, Michael, you got to roll.
Florida, they were very, very positive about my chances of completing medical school. They recruited me actively, wanted me there, let me know that I would be accepted. In fact, their national day of acceptance is on January the 15th. They called me in November to let me know that I was already accepted.
Wow.
And so the degree I earned carried a lot of weight. It was very, very helpful once I got out of there, but there were some barriers to getting through there.
Yes.
And I do plan to write a book about some of my experiences there, and I'm gonna ask Tom to help me with some of it. As a matter of fact, he's given me some good ideas already, and find a publisher. It's a whole book of stuff that I can talk about.
Wow, that's great.
Dr. John, we appreciate you, man. Thank you. And you got anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Well, you guys stay positive, and we're gonna get out and vote. And like Obama said, don't boo, don't boo, vote.
Oh, yes.
Dr. John, I'll tell you this. I had one class where it's history class. And after class, the professor asked me to stay, and I stayed. And he said, two guys who were on the football team, he says, you know they're in this class. I said, they're in this class? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I've never seen them. He said, well, that's why I'm talking to you. He said, because they hadn't come. He said, tell them if they come, I'm going to pass them. I said, wait a minute. So if they come, you going to pass? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So I come every day, so I guess I'm going to get an A, huh? And I got an
A. Wow.
And then there was another class where, man, this guy, he did Birth of a Nation in class. And if you're familiar with Birth of a Nation, it's full of nigga this, nigga that kind of. And he would look right at me the whole time he was saying it. And I just, I just would stare back at him because I was going to pass that class. And, he couldn't not pass that class. So.
Right.
It was interesting. But Dr. John, thank you, man. We appreciate you, brother.
It's my pleasure, and you guys keep up the good work, keeping the community informed, and I'll ask you to bring me back when I get my book written.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. John.
Thank you, Dr. Jernigan.
Okay, y'all take care.
Okay, my closing comment for today, or as I see it, I'd like to leave you today with a big thank you to the Troy Public Radio team, Troy University Public Radio team, in partnership with Alabama Aloud for the evening of stories last week in Opelika, Alabama. It was an enlightening evening where a couple of my stories from my book of short stories, I have a short story series called A Slice of Life, Another Slice of Life, and the Rest of the Pie. And they were read by myself and recorded by Don Noble, a former professor at the University of Alabama. My stories were Mother's Day and Coach, an interview with public radio to be broadcast on public radio's All Things Considered was icing on the cake. And that's our show for today. I want to thank the audience. We appreciate you. Thank our G-List guest, Dr. John Jernigan. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl Inc. Thanks again to the TWT team, Barbara, Sean, Emily, Michael, and Joyce. And that's it. On this October the 15th, remember, a day without a smile is a day wasted. If you've got an extra one, give one to someone else today. Enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Peace.